All right. Well, we are holding five Noahide class number 21. And we spoke last week about teaching a non-Jew. And what are you allowed to teach? Not allowed to teach. Right, a non-Jew delves into the laws, certainly deserves honor, respect, like the high priest, like Kohen Gadol. But they delve into too much, then may not. A non-Jew delves into Torah, he doesn't learn, may deserve that. So again, that's only in-depth analytical Torah study. Again, superficial exploration, it's okay. Now we're going to look at the other side. That we saw before when a non-Jew is not allowed to learn, or how much they're not allowed to learn. Now the question is, what about people that teach non-Jews? Right? It's prohibition, seemingly teaching a non-Jew. So now I have to see how it all works. So the source, Chagiga 13b, Talmud tells us, name of Ravami. Ravami, don't give over the words of Torah to a non-Jew. Was written in Psalms, chapter 147, verses 19 and 20. That is, it did not do so to any other nation. Of its laws, they were not informed. Seemingly, Torah is given to Jews, not to non-Jews. Non-Jews have to know what applies. But if Torah only taught to the Jews, how are they allowed to teach non-Jews? Right? That's the question. So, one of the commentaries, Tosfos, asked about Kamma 13a, what's this verse talking about? It's a positive mitzvah for Jews to safeguard their unique relationship with their Torah. And what did we say last week? Non-Jews usurping their power. Some, let's say that, some non-Jews are taking on much more than they should. So they have the status of theft. They're thieves, essentially. That's on the one hand. But if it's our unique responsibility, the Jewish people, to safeguard the Torah, then who are we to teach non-Jews? To be allowed to teach them. So the question that Tosfos asked in Chagiga, on the piece of Talmud we quoted, the Talmud already stated, there's an injunction that non-Jews aren't allowed to learn Torah, as it says in Sanhedrin 59a. But all the more so, it would make sense. Jews are prohibited from teaching non-Jews. Non-Jews can't learn it. How can Jews teach it? What's the prohibition? Prohibition is to favor Lotikane Mixel. Place a stumbling block before the blind. That's Leviticus chapter 19, verse 14. See, if I know when non-Jews aren't allowed to learn, how can a Jew teach them? A Jew will be over a prohibition of putting a stumbling block over here. So if a Jews are teaching non-Jew Torah, causing the Jew to transgress, the non-Jew to transgress. So the question is, why learn it out? From Psalm 147. Now Tosfos makes the claim, really the only answer makes sense over here. Is that what's the Talmud talking about? A case where there's another Jew available, willing to teach the non-Jew Torah. Another non-Jew will be willing to teach over here. So if the Hever places a stumbling block, that's only the case the Jew directly enables another's transgression. It has to be direct. If it's indirect, It's not forbidden. If the transgressor, right, we'll see how this works, could accomplish their deeds without the Jews involved. They can do it without prohibition. And there's no prohibition. In other words, he gets the knowledge elsewhere. Doesn't need me. Right? He get the information somewhere else. No problem with Yeshiva. So here, Tosfos learns that the Jews are all willing to teach prohibited Torah and on. Isn't that ironic? Right? So today, you got Jews don't want to teach. We're not interested in giving over to non-Jews. Probably a good reason is probably not qualified, but you get non-Jews willing to give over on Jews. And there are plenty of non-Jews out there who shouldn't be doing that either. I don't want to digress here. Nonetheless, what the Talmud tell me, there's another broken offense. What does Psalm 147 say? We learned two things. Tosfos explains. Two things. First of all, a Jew, not a non-Jew. Why? When his son would walk in front of him. But if there are Jews available willing to teach non-Jews, doesn't apply. Second thing is, all Jews, nonetheless, we have a verse, Book of Psalms. All Jews are prohibited from teaching Torah to non-Jews. So, one issue may be putting a stumbling block in front of a non-Jew. Second thing is maybe totally forbidden for anybody to teach a non-Jew. So, now we're going to see this contradiction. Talmud, another place, Kamma 38a. Now the Roman government sent two officers to the sage's visit. What do they say? Teach your Torah. He said once, read it once, reviewed it, then read it a third time. And either they studied it with the sages 3 times, or the sages taught the 3 things. What they teach? Tanakh, Mishnah, Gemara. Now we get a problem. Right, according to this, seems like it's okay. Right, what we said before. What we said before is forbidden. So what's the resolution? How are we going to answer? Tosfos gives us 2 answers. One is, what's the decree teaching Torah against teaching Torah? Isn't the decree what we call Yared or Yav? Meaning a Jew would have to give up their life rather than transgress. We don't see that's the case. Right? It doesn't require one to give up his life and suffer hardship rather than transgress. Since the teaching of these 2 officers was a decree by the Roman government, they have no choice. It's not something they have an obligation to give up their life. Right? What's something they have to give up their life for? Idolatry, murder, or immorality. Teaching Torah or non-Jew, not one of them. Or a second reason, perhaps 2 officials converted, in which case teaching them, it's okay. Now, the text itself, someone will ask, was that really what the text says? The text over there doesn't make any reference. So it's maybe a little bit of a jump, telling me that it's talking about conversion. Right, we know from Megillah 9a, the sages were forced to translate the Torah into Greek. So in order to disguise certain passages, the sages made a number of textual changes. But the Gemara in Kamma says, not like that. The sages over here did not make any changes. They taught the 2 officers the exact Torah. Why didn't they alter certain passages? So the conclusion is, must be the officers converted. Right? There are issues with this answer. Well, that's one problem. That's the second answer. Comes on the Amshel Shlomo, the great later commentary. And he says, those only proves 2 answers. Right? But one answer would have been, right, one of the answers seemingly not so good. Why? You look at the first answer, who's to say it refers to actual Jewish law? Right, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what's supposed to happen. Maybe teaching of Torah to non-Jews only prohibited, even upon pain of death. Maybe. A possibility. Right? It's hard to say such a thing. Because a person has to give up his life for certain things, not this. Right? So you need another explanation. Maybe they convert. So here, there could be some exception. Right? What could be one exception? Right? Maybe teaching the non-Jews, it's their own law. It's not something that, it's not something they don't need to learn. Maybe it's just their own law, potentially. If it be their own law, they're explaining their own law, not a problem. Right? Maybe thinking about that. So now we do understand teaching non-Jews is forbidden, even though it's not recorded any major halachic code. No legal code over here says such a thing. The Talmud brings it down. We don't see anywhere in Jewish law says such a thing. Many people make careers teaching Torah to non-Jews. Not me. Not a career. Right? Ray's working on that. But okay. Not necessarily a career over here. I mean, okay, I work with non-Jews who want to convert. Right? That may be true. That's definitely true. So, if someone makes their career from teaching Torah to non-Jews, how can we say such a thing? Well, it doesn't say in the code of Jewish law. That's a problem. That'd be the obvious thing. If it would be such a problem, why doesn't it say anywhere in the code of Jewish law? Why isn't it brought down? Now, many later authorities say not true. It is brought down. It's not omitted. The Maimonides, the Rambam, laws of Talmud Torah, chapter 4, halacha 1, and the Code of Jewish Law, here a day, 246, halacha 7, both say a general prohibition. Both bring down a general prohibition. Teaching Torah to non-Jews who should have received it forbidden. Okay, now I got a problem. How are we going to get out of this? Now, later rabbinic authorities, they understand what's the prohibition. Right? They understand the prohibition against teaching Torah to non-Jews is a general prohibition. A general prohibition. Right? The question, though, is what's the final law? Maybe the prohibition of teaching those who are unworthy. Right? But I could say, what about teaching the Jews unworthy? How many of Jews out there unworthy? I have to look too far on social media to see that. People make comments. I always say, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. See someone shooting off their mouth, they don't know. Right, worse for a non-Jew thinking he knows. I mentioned this, I think, this story once before. Someone made a claim, his whole video, making a certain claim. The Code of Jewish Law says it like this. Now, he butchered every Hebrew word. That's a dead giveaway. Butchered every Hebrew word. But not only that, even though the Code of Jewish Law says it, says what they said. That was true. But if they ever lived in a Jewish community, they know that that's not how we hold. And not only that, the commentators on the Code of Jewish Law say what it's talking about. So if you're going to make a video about Jewish law, better don't know what you're talking about. No one, how do I know? How do I know this? A student of mine showed me this. He says, this is really true. He told me what it was about. I said, no. I said, let me see. Let me see what he quotes. I'll look it up. I looked it up. I made a whole thing against it. Because, the person made a claim. He quoted Jewish law. Very good. But see, you can't read the commentaries. Commentaries have been translated. So he makes a statement. Now, even without going to the commentary. How do I know we don't hold that way? How do I know we don't hold that way? Because over the community does. What was the case? The case was, Code of Jewish law says, every woman, single or married, let's say better, any Jewish woman, single or married, have to cover their hair. Now, what's the obvious question? The obvious question is, unmarried women don't cover their hair. Whether it's Sephardic, Ashkenazi, maybe in Yemen, where they wanted to, show that, maybe children were married, so they weren't taken, or abused or whatever. Okay, that's one thing. But in any community, ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, across the board, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, you name it, no single women cover their hair. I don't know why this person picked that. But that's not what happened. How do I know? Because I lived in a lot of Orthodox communities. No single women cover their hair. There's a question if a married woman gets divorced or widowed, whether they have to carry their hair. Different issue. That's a different issue. But how do you make a claim? Again, this is what the Code of Jewish law says. Don't disagree. But practically speaking, that's not what happens. Why not? Because the commentators explain what it's talking about. Obviously, this person couldn't read the commentators, so he didn't know. So why are you making a video about something that you don't know? Because if you would have lived in a Jewish community, you would say, hey, what's going on here? I don't see single women cover their hair. Then guys going to jump up and down, hey, why aren't Orthodox Jewish women covering their hair if they're not married? They say, fool, nobody holds like that. We don't hold like that. Oh, so why does the Shulchan Aruch say it? Okay, good question. Why does it say it? So the commentators explain what the case is. You can't have a buffoon giving over Jewish law. Looks silly. Not to mention the fact couldn't pronounce any Hebrew word. That's also a dead giveaway. So why wasting time? Making a video like this, sit and learn. You got time to learn. What are you worried about this? So again, the question is the final law like this? There's a prohibition of teaching up. Right? That's how we get on to it. Prohibition of teaching someone unworthy. So somebody like this is unworthy. Shouldn't be allowed to open his mouth. Let him learn for a number of years before he says anything. But he goes up, shoots off his mouth. Tries to show what he knows. Kind of looks silly. The Moshe smashed the tablets. The Jews participate in the sin of the golden calf. They're unfit to learn Torah. So there's a comparison between Jews who participate in the golden calf and non-Jews, including non-Jews who are in the same category, not fit to study. That's not fully conclusive. Not fully conclusive. Now, the Shulchan Aruch says that it's forbidden to teach the Torah to an Eved Canaanite, Canaanites, indentured servants. Now, what would this prohibition tell me? In general, it would tell me that you don't know how to teach a non-Jew Torah in general. Now, since it's a prohibition, having a non-Jew learning Torah, this is not something, even though I think a lot of people really take this lightly, Yeah, I can learn this and I can learn that and whatever. It's not so simple, as we've seen. It is punishable by the hands of heaven over here. So too, Jews should not take lightly the prohibition against teaching Torah to non-Jews. Not so simple. Comes along with Shlomo Luria, author of the Yom Shel Shlomo, and he writes, Baba Kamma, chapter 4, Mishnah 9, woe to those that teach Torah to non-Jews. Uh-oh. Their sin is greater than ever can possibly bear. They will not see the redemption of Zion. Now, could be he's only talking about oral law. Teaching Torah to non-Jews and things they have to know different issues. Right? It might be a totally different issue. What's the point? It's a pretty severe prohibition. Pretty darn severe prohibition. So a person got to be careful. Now the question is, what are we allowed to teach or not? Everyone agrees, oral law, fortunately a lot of non-Jews learning oral law shouldn't be taught to non-Jews. Doesn't apply to them. Now, what about written law? What about the written Torah? So that there's a debate. So, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch, Chayes, commentary to the Talmud, the Sota 35a, says that there are poskim the size of the Torah law, and decide it's forbidden to teach the oral law, but they're allowed to teach written Torah. Now, there's been a whole discussion. What's he talking about? No one makes such a distinction. Right? Seemingly no one makes such a distinction what he said. The whole debate, what did he mean? We have an earlier source. We mentioned the Yom Shel Shlomo. Seems to understand Talmud's prohibition is what? Oral law. Others understand it the same way. Oral law. Now, by process of inference, what would I say? Oral law is forbidden, but what's permissible? Written Torah. That would be permissible. And there are those that say, no, they didn't even teach written Torah. Alright, comes along the Shiltei Gemara, the great early commentary. The Vodah Zarah 6a. Hold the person may not teach Chumash. 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But you're allowed to teach the prophets and the writings. Where do you see that? If you're allowed to teach written Torah, then what's the difference? Either tell me I'm allowed to teach it all, or I'm not allowed to teach it all. So it's not clear. From the Noahides Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, i.e. known as the Netziv, acronym of his name, former head of the Yeshiva of Volozhin, after Chaim of Volozhin, the famed students of the Vilna Gaon, holds you can teach the written Torah to non-Jews. Why? It's not commanded Joshua to write the Torah in how many languages? 70. Therefore, it must be okay. Because if God wants to make it accessible to others, it's fine. The Yahweh permits teaching written Torah. Why? Because what the Talmud only prohibits non-Jews delving into it after oral law. What's the inference? Oral law forbidden. Written law permissible. Come along, Rabbi Yosef. Of blessed memory is Yavi Omer. And he says that teaching oral or written Torah to non-Jews is forbidden. So he's very stringent, both are forbidden. Comes along Moshe Feinstein, Torah giant, the last generation of America, and the Sitz Eliezer, Rebbe Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, of blessed memory. They didn't completely decide over it. Really, Yom Shel Shlomo and the Shiltei Gemara. So their conclusion's a little bit hedged. Really, a person shouldn't teach written Torah and on you. That's really how it should come out. But if one does, he shouldn't be rebuked. But that's what to rely on. Prophets and writings, a person can teach them on. That's what we rely on, in general. It's sort of in the middle. Chumash may be forbidden, writings of prophets, not forbidden. Come along, Rabbi Yosef Shalom Eliashim, blessed memory. Zohar dying for the last generation. And he bases on the Zohar, which is a little bit strange. But we don't normally go according to Jewish law, according to Zohar, according to Kabbalah, in general. States that a person can teach no part of Torah at all, other than what's relevant to the Noahide laws. Now, again, it's a little bit hard according, they're going to go according to Zohar, which doesn't normally do, right? Without going into the other, commentaries, Sealed to be Boring and the others. But okay, could be, he didn't have control over what was published, or whatever. It could be a number of things. But I would say, forget about the Zohar. Right? I would say, what's relevant to the Noahide laws, I would agree, should be permitted. And if you're teaching Chumash to prove your point, why should that be forbidden? You're teaching what Noahides need to know. You want to tell me delving into oral law back and forth? Might be an issue. Now, I heard someone told me, I didn't see it in print. So, I can't say it's a really true source. But the brother-in-law of Rabbi Chaim Coffman, blessed memory, Rabbi Yitzhak Zilberstein, was said to have said there are certain parts of Talmud may apply it on you. Certain laws of damages, other things. They wouldn't be allowed to live. Now, obviously not in death. Right? But again, I didn't see that in writing. And I guarantee if I would ask my Rebbe that question, he'd say no outright. He would say absolutely no. Not even if you don't teach him in death. But again, I didn't see that in print, so I just throw that out there. But what Rabbi Eliashim says to me makes sense. Why can't you elucidate what the Torah says in order to explain the Noahide law? I think that makes sense. It should be forbidden, but what do we see? There's a major difference of opinion here, whether even you're allowed to teach that or not. Right in the prophets, everyone seems to agree. Chumash a different issue. Different issue. So what do we hold, practically speaking? So sages conclude Jews are permitted, even encouraged, to teach non-Jews part of the Torah relating to the Noahide obligation. Right, Rabbi Yosef and others. Right, but there are some that say even teaching non-Jews is forbidden. Teaching Noahide laws is forbidden. Right? Now, how are they going to learn the Noahide laws if we don't teach them? Some say that teaching non-Jews about the Noahide laws only a mitzvah before giving of the Torah. But it was prohibited afterwards. That's, a little bit hard to say also. Right? But here, I'll make one caveat. So you were saying, according to some, Jews are permitted, even encouraged, to teach non-Jews. Now, my Rebbe has a very long response, one of the longest responses he has. Response to him, let's say, that he has. And he says, pretty clear, in no way, shape, or form is there an obligation for a Jew to reach out to non-Jews. Teach them their mitzvah. They come to you, different issue. He disagrees with it. Who says we're encouraged? Right, I had a troll controlling me for a while. Saying, you're the light of the nations. You're the light of the nations. Yeah. So you have an obligation to reach out. Who said? We mentioned this before. The obligation to reach out, even to a Jew, what's the obligation? Because the Talmud says, Kol Yisrael Arabian Zelim. All Jews are intertwined. We're not intertwined with non-Jews. Who says I have a mitzvah to reach out? So again, what will this troll say? This troll will say, you're the chosen people. Okay? That's true. Right? So what does that have to do with anything? So you're going to be a light into nation. So does that mean on every corner where there's a church or paganism, tried to put up a sign trying to convince non-Jews to be Noahides? Who says I have an obligation to do that? I have to look out for Jews first. No offense. We look out for our own. So if I'm going to look out for Jews, who says I have an obligation over here? As my Rebbe said, there's no obligation. Now the early commentators, later commentators, none. None. That's what he holds. We're going to disagree over here a little bit. Right? Even the courage to teach non-Jews. Who says? The difference is, my Rebbe would agree, if they come to you, and you have the ability to teach them as a Jew, you got an obligation to teach. I have to go looking for non-Jews. People accuse me scamming off a non-Jew, right? For conversion. I'm like, listen, I have a service. You want to get knowledge. I'm only telling them what I do. It's not proselytization. I'm not convincing people. They want to convert, great. They don't want to convert, also good. But to say I have an obligation to reach out to non-Jews, teach them their laws, these are universal laws. These are things people should know, in and of themselves. But, it's been a long exile. So now people are coming back. They want to learn. They want to know what applies to them. So if a Jew knows that they come to them, good, they should help them. I would agree. I have to reach out to them. Who says? The mitzvah for a Jew to reach out to another Jew is only because we're all intertwined. When a Jew does something wrong, we understand. Secular Jew, doesn't matter. Religious Jew, we're all blamed. Can you imagine an Italian in Brooklyn does something wrong, does something egregious? You say, all right, we're going to burn down Italy. No more cannolis. It's over, as we would say in Boston. It's over. Never happened. Oh, a secular Jew does something, or an Orthodox Jew does something, all Jews get blamed. Why do all Jews get blamed? For this reason. Every Jew's interrelated. Non-Jew's not interrelated over here. Who says I have to, so I put up what I do, fine. But who says I have to reach out to them? Who says I have to look for all these non-Jews? Right? Who says I have to get the non-Jews over here? Who says that's my obligation? Right? That shouldn't be my obligation over here. Totally shouldn't be my obligation. Now, question is, how much do I teach? What am I allowed to teach? So the extent of what is taught, again, another disagreement. Comes on the Marshal, that Gemara in Chagiga that says only basic tenet of what is permitted and forbidden is allowed to be taught. Basic tenets, that's it. Nothing else. And they should be left on their own to delve deeper. The Rambam and others more lenient. Now, look what the Marshal over here says. Let's analyze the draw. They're only allowed to be taught basic tenets. Okay? They're allowed to be taught basic tenets. And they're left on their own. Now, Ray can definitely justify this. I can certainly justify this. You leave non-Jews on their own, what are they going to find? It's going to be a hard find. People are going to learn this, learn that, learn the other thing, and they don't have guidance. They don't have guidance. They're going to be totally lost. Right now, according to Marshall, maybe the Marshall says, let him be lost. What's the difference? Let him be lost. Not my responsibility, Marshall says. But if they're gonna learn and delve deeper, I don't think they're gonna get very far. Right? And we know what's out there. Many people teaching should never be teaching. People doing their own thing. That's why we have this course. It's hard fun. People thinking they know more. Let them doubt more. So now you get people, they didn't even read Hebrew, barely read Hebrew, and they're talking about, Kamma, in the 10 spirits, right? In all the, in all the spiritual worlds. You think they really know? You think they really understand? Come on. That's a problem. Right? That's a definite problem. I would say over here, gotta be careful. Right? 100% you gotta be careful. What's tough? The non-Jews, what are they allowed to learn? I don't have my video here. Alright. Whatever. What are they allowed to learn? Oh, there we go. What are they allowed to learn? They can, they can certainly attend class on Parsha, right? The weekly Torah portion of the week. Basic class is a Mishnah of Torah law. But Talmud, Medrash, Kabbalah. Oh, did we just say that? Forbidden! I love people who want to run before they know how to walk or crawl. Or like I say, I get this question a lot. I tell people, listen, how can you learn calculus if you never learned algebra, trigonometry? Well, that's right. If I don't learn trig or algebra, I can't learn calculus. Right? And if you don't know the basics, in Judaism, how are you going to learn? How can you learn Gemara and other things? Kabbalah. You're not going to know. You're not going to know. If an non-Jew now, what happens if a non-Jew sits in such a class? Right? It's a good question. All right? First, we're giving a class, now it's talking about measures, other things. The non-Jew is sitting there. You have to stop. So the non-Jew leaves. The Moshe Feinstein was asked such a question. And the answer, the prohibition of teaching Torah only applies when it's directed or intended for non-Jews. If it's intended, directed for a Jew, yet a non-Jew stops by, he sits in the class, no transgression. No transgression committed from the other side, from the side of the Jew. But the non-Jew transgressing his own prohibition. Why? Because he's not allowed to study what's prohibited. So therefore, the teacher doesn't have to stop. If a non-Jew got a problem, he's learning things he shouldn't be learning. And I say like this, you got someone teaching, there are other Jews in the class, but I don't have a problem if non-Jews come in. But if you're explaining something according to the Torah, explain it a little bit deeper, that's okay. If they happen to come in. If it's all non-Jews, different issue. That's a different issue. But if you know there's a mixture, you're not the one making the problem. It's a non-Jew there that's making the problem. So he's the one who transgresses, not the other way around. So in such a case, good question. Would he have to stop or not? Right? And the answer is no. The non-Jew got a problem. Now, start telling people they can't sit on a class. Forget Talmud. Maybe they know that. But those giving a class in Medrash, they allowed to sit in? No. Should be forbidden. Now, it could be someone's giving a class and they mention Medrash. Not the whole class is about that. But it mentions a Medrash. That's forbidden? No. If you tell me the whole class is about that, one thing. But if it's interwoven things in the Torah itself, different issue. But see, there's a general problem here. What's the general problem we mentioned many times? The general problem is people overstep their boundaries. They'll learn Chumash. They'll see Rashi quotes the Medrash. What do they want? What's the first thing they want to do? Look it up. They have it in English. Look it up. That's the problem. I want to understand Rashi better. There's a question going in depth. We mentioned. But the major issue here is, I think we mentioned last week as well, and that is that you tell a non-Jew, whatever you do, don't learn this. Whatever you do, don't learn that. What's the first thing they want to learn? Exactly what's forbidden. That's what they want to do. Why? Because things that are forbidden are much more juicy, much more enjoyable. What can I learn? What can I learn over here? Oh, that's exactly what I want. Yeah, so any questions on that? About what may or may not be taught, what the general halacha is about teaching Torah to non-Jews, and the different contradictions. Right? The contradiction between the two pieces of Gemara. Any questions on any of that? All right, question here. See what's quicker. Type or unmute yourself. Let's see. I could be waiting on mute here, no? All right, yeah. Any questions? Any other questions? For general questions. Let's see. Oh, someone asked, how can I advise a fellow Noahide who asks me how to find a rabbi who knows Noahide law? Well, if you know someone who knows Noahide law, put him in that direction. Right? In other words, there are people out there, that teach Noahide laws that know what they're doing. You can point them in the right direction. And obviously, not everyone's necessarily going to be a good fit. Personality-wise, personality-wise, you can send them to me if you want. Either on Facebook at Rabbi Chaim Coffman, be on Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, and stuff for Noahides also, not I mean, most of that stuff is for conversion, but, deal with Noahide also, right? You can definitely, put plenty of stuff up there. So, send it my way or other people, right? If you know other people that are qualified, not a problem. Finding a rabbi is not so easy, by the way. A lot of things go into finding a rabbi. Right? It has to be someone obviously knows what they're doing, but also someone that has the ability to relate to. A person can have world-class knowledge and not be able to relate to non-Jews. It's just they don't have anything common with them. Especially if they grow up religious family and all that. You gotta find someone who's a little bit out there that knows both worlds. Knows how to relate to them. There are people out there. I think there are a lot of people out there who should never be teaching. They just, big problem. What they say, what their sources are, who their rabbis are, so to speak. It's a big problem. It's a big problem today, working with Noahide Nations Course. Noahide, I think, is working. In different ways. And a handful of people know what they're doing. I mean, a handful. Converts, I say the same thing. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm the only one out there. But there are, as we said, not everyone, should be teaching. And there are people that are frauds. So be careful with that. Plenty of them out there. Definitely plenty of them out there. But yeah, you send them to me if you want. Be more than happy to have it. Yeah, any other questions? All right, if there are no questions, I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions, send me an email at Rabbi Chaim Coffman at gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com. So I'm going to sign out, which next week we'll continue with this. Anyone has any questions, feel free to leave an email. Otherwise, I'm going to sign out, whichever are good. Middle of the day, or almost end of the day for me. And everyone have a great rest of the week.
You are currently the only person in this conference.